bloody hostel architecture. Take a look at these examples of hostel architecture. Can you spot the difference? There's a second chance. Here, try again. What is the difference between these two examples? Of course, it's obvious. They have different designs, right? Well, the difference in design is actually the result of something much more significant, the intention behind it. Both objects serve the same function, but they're designed with different intentions. One has a repulsive intent, it discourages certain behaviors without appearing overly hostile. The other has an aggressive intent, deliberately creating a threatening or hostile environment. Interestingly, the more aggressive form of hostile architecture is most often found at the boundaries between different properties, between public and private space. Because of this, many people consider its application reasonable. In fact, there is a growing trend to soften the harsh visual impression of this type of hostile architecture by using euphemistic language. It's often described as defensive architecture rather than what this actually is. We frequently hear the terms such as defensive architecture, anti-homeless architecture, exclusionary architecture, and many others. We want to challenge this terminology because we believe it is misleading, but we'll save that discussions for another episode. Today we want to challenge the increasingly common belief that aggressive hostile architecture is justified simply because it's placed at the boundary between private and public space. We disagree. This thought have inspired us to create this illustration. Stay tuned to reveal the full story and the concept behind it. You walk by the sidewalk over here in Brussels and then you find this kind of gates. As you can see, we understand that these gates over here are protecting the private zone from the public zone. But there is a difference between protection. If it's protective, for example, in our mindset, the bars could have been with a smaller in-between distance, or they could have just filled in the gaps with some little tiny net. But here instead, we have very sharp blades. We always have to question, why such a sharp blade was here installed? Is it the intention to protect or to harm? For example, you may be walking here with your child and they're very exploitative creatures, and a child can come here and harm itself. On the other hand, if you don't care about children, if you have a dog, puppy, we all love those furry things, right? They can come here and they might harm themselves. So here we come to the question, the manufacturer, who proposed and designed these kind of spikes which are framing the public space, want it or not, and we know they're a little bit inside the private zone, but they're still part of the public membrane. And this leads us to our first question. Is this legal? Being owner of a private space does not mean you can do whatever you want. For instance, if you want to renovate your facade or change the windows, you still have to follow different rules that will satisfy the standards of the common sphere, which means you have to apply for a permit. So how come sharp blades have not been seen as a potential danger, but we're quite explicit that polyvinyl windows are less desired than the wooden ones? Additionally, to us the design of this gate looks like an afterthought or an attempt to spend less money but achieve more fearful security. Usually, the distance between safety bars should be around 11 centimeters. Here, the distance between the bars is around 26 centimeters. That means that this design is saving 1 bar per each 11 centimeters, which means that if this gate over here has 20 vertical bars, in fact, it has to have 40, which equals to less metal and less money. So we obviously see a design loop, and how do they fix this? By adding sharp blades in between. Just imagine that there was some person who said, hey, you know what? We will fill in the gaps with sharp blades. We will keep repeating this. There is a difference between intention of protecting and hurting. And while we are talking about this study case, not to forget to remind you to get and order our book, The Urban Revolution is a Fun Sketch. You can find the links in the description. Inside, actually, you can find exactly this example that we're just presenting it right now, and you can find many others interesting ways how to analyze and observe the city around you with a little bit more out of the box and creative way. Here we go. And now let's go back to our bloody hostel architecture.
We are standing on the backyard of a corporate bank in Brussels. They did kind of install big gates for logistic entrances, and on top of them, they added these sharp blade sort of cutting edges. This place is super secured. You see the security are coming. There is cameras, there is like alarm, there is like you're right in downtown. The question is, which is always raising and coming back, what is the purpose of these blades? Is it to scare people, not to climb up, to protect the money that is inside? Or is it just to give a symbol of power for this corporate bank? Or gives it like a citadel feeling? What do you think about it? Is it legal? Did these guys, the corporate bank, applied for a building permit? Because why you are talking about it? Because it's part of the street facades. So when you pass by here every morning, by the way, there are schools here, kids coming again, passing by adults, elderly people, and they see this scenery with blades and they kind of click in their heads. I don't know. We don't know. Actually, we don't bitch on these blades, but we always raise the question, is it normal to have such brutal, hostile, bloody elements in our streets?
Unlike the design of the previous fence, this one looks quite sophisticated. All those spikes being welded in the rotational position around the bar resembles a true effort. That directly indicates that the investor, in this case the bank, was dedicated to pay additional portion of money for something that can make sure that you will be harmed. The executive core for the design of the bank, all those smart and educated people, found it suitable to approve a design of a bar that can guarantee the possibility of harming living beings regardless of the angle they approach. Sorry, but this looks barbaric and medieval, and if they wanted to prevent birds shitting on their gates, they could have thought of another element rather than this torturing machine. Finally, since they were ready to invest into a special bloody gate for extra security, they could have invested into some other creative inventions. They could have created a slippery bar that constantly rotates, for example, just freestyling to provoke your imagination. And slowly we are getting to the most simple example, which is actually the mother of all those bloody urban designs. As you can see over here, we have a fairly high gate. The height of the gate definitely discourages people from entering into the private zone, and there is a lot of signs telling you that this private zone is under camera surveillance. Yet, we have spikes on top of these gates. Now, you may think that this actually is insignificant and naive, but this over here, it is actually the answer of our psychology. You see, even though we have developed all these sophisticated manners of protection, such as cameras, insurance policies, alarms, we still have to put some concept that has been developed into the primitive era of our existence. On a cognitive level, this idea is so deeply and unreasonably engraved into our mindset that we simply expect that on top of the gates, we have to see some sharp elements. And of course, in today's liberal capitalist economy, for the manufacturers, it goes without saying, they're automatically putting these spike sharp elements on top of the gates. And in order to show their expertise and experience in the field, they also provide you, if the client has more money, provide you with more creative, inspired designs, which actually end up with up and twisted, bloody designs such as those that we have shown in the previous videos. And we're not alone in this. There are many people who just won't install these brutal defensive gates. This matter can really be solved in a much more mature way with the purpose of creating understanding and prevention. For example, this could be solved with gates that are gradually inclining and are offering some additional aesthetics as well. There are also designs where the highest horizontal bar can be quite lower than the highest point of the vertical bars, discouraging climbing. There are also different landscape designs that can help into making distance from the gate. And finally, let's take a look at our city secret sketch. In this illustration, you can see a gate that, as always, serves as a barrier between private and public property. The gate already fulfills its intended function. It is a protective adjustable layer that safeguards privacy while at the same time framing the public rail. It allows for a certain degree of visual communication between both sides, and like any barrier within any system, it is penetrable to some extent. Unlike an ordinary gate, the openings that allow the penetration are equipped with sharp, deadly grinding blades. Their purpose is both hidden and explicit. They are clearly designed to injure whatever attempts to pass through them. Then we notice something else. In the public space, there is a simple toy, a teddy bear. The teddy bear is attached by a rope that passes through the bladed gate and connects to the private property. The rope becomes a metaphor for the inseparable relationship between public and private space. The teddy bear, exposed in the public realm but controlled from the private side through a dangerous barrier, becomes a metaphor for a trap. And then we see a child walking towards the teddy bear. This is a clear sign for who this trap is intended for. We're not asking whether this type of aggressive hostile architecture targets only children. Instead, we want to expose the fact that public space is used in countless formal and informal ways, and that this kind of hostility, whether intentional or not, can pose a physical or psychological threat to everyone who occupies it. Yet, little by little, this condition is becoming normalized. The question we pose is this: is it really necessary to accept this kind of aggressive hostile architecture as a normal part of urban design? This is the moment to reverse this perspective. Instead of questioning the presence of vulnerable groups in public space, why don't we question the mindset of those who choose to install hostile architecture elements in the first place? By ignoring their presence at the edges of public space, are we quietly endorsing a culture of aggression that gradually extends deeper into the public realm? Are we allowing transformation from hostile architecture into a bloody architecture? Finally, as always, don't forget that these sketches are later on transformed into City Secrets cards, collectible cards featuring valuable urban observations and discussion points. Soon, we are also turning this into a game. Become a collector by joining our Patreon, either for free or through one of our membership tiers, and start building your collection. As a welcome gift, we send 5 promotional cards to every new member. And don't forget to order our book. You'll love it. See you in the next episode.